What is up? Welcome back to fantasy football. It is NFL week 1, and that means it is DFS week 1. We'll give you a little bit of an explanation of DFS if you are completely new to the show, but for the most part, we're going to be breaking down our favorite picks as we head into this very first main slate. It is Ryan Weisse. It is Austin Amandolia. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy. Pardon my week 1 jitters when I'm double clicking intro videos. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me is Austin, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you tonight?
Doing great. Excited to be talking DFS. We are fully into the NFL season.
Yeah, I knocked out my first DFS rankings over on Football Guys today. I'm ready to talk this slate with you. Before we get started, folks, couple of reminders right from the top. We don't just talk DFS. We play DFS, and you could play with us, take some of our money. It's $2 contest on DraftKings. I believe the one's still going on FanDuel. Haven't seen the intro to that one yet, but I'm sure it's still going on. You will find links to those in the description of this video, but more importantly, join our Discord. There's a DFS channel on our completely free Discord. We're going to drop the links in there. We're going to take care of you guys over there. As I mentioned, it's free. A lot of stuff going on in the Discord. We are live chatting the game that's going on right now while we record this. It's worth your time, and it's worth your $0. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. We just crossed 1,600 subscribers. We'd love to hit 2,000. You can help us with that. Normally, I would start this show with what we call answers to the test. That is the lineup that made somebody $1 million last week. There was no last week. It's week 1, so just get ready for that in upcoming weeks. So without further ado, let's get into the week 1 plays. If you've never tuned into DFS Academy before, this is Austin's show. I'm here to add some narrative. Austin is the king of cash plays, and that is where we start this thing. We call it top of the class. These are the high price guys, over $8,000, the big name guys that you want to build your lineup. If you're not familiar with cash, Austin, why don't you start by explaining something we do every season, kind of the difference between cash and tourney and what you're going to be looking for in these plays we're going to talk about, and then we'll get into your first pick.
Yeah. So whenever we're talking cash, we're talking those 50-50 contests, those double ups, and those head-to-heads. Essentially, the idea behind cash is that half of the field is taking home money. And the reason we focus on it, or the reason I focus on it so much, is because it is a way to ensure your bankroll remains sustainable throughout the year. It is really hard to win into cash in tournaments where only the top 15 to 23, 24% of players win anything in those contests. Whereas you're in those cash lineups, half of the field is likely doubling their money, which when you're playing those contests and you're playing them smartly, like we'll talk throughout the season, you are able to sustain a bankroll that helps you support your tournament contest. So for me, I put 80 to 90% of my bankroll each week into cash contests, and I put the other 20%, 10 to 20% in tournaments. So right now I'm starting off $50 a week. That means I'm putting $40 towards cash contest. I enter the $25 50-50 on DraftKings. I do $15 of head-to-heads, and then the remaining $10 I have goes towards tournaments where I'm hoping to take down the top.
And Austin, if I'm correct, and this is more of a opinion type thing and more of you tend, if I'm guessing correctly, you tend to prefer DraftKings tournaments. No particular reason, or?
I tend to prefer DraftKings tournaments just because I'm more successful in them, and because I think that for some reason I'm more consistently able to do well in the PPR formats. But I do play tournaments on FanDuel as well. I play the underdog snake tournaments where I've actually had the most success.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember that from last year. Underdog was your big win last year.
So. Yes, I did take down a tournament on underdog, which is really fun and really helped sustain my bankroll. So I do diversify my portfolio a little bit, but I do tend to focus on DraftKings a little bit more than FanDuel and underdog.
Now that you guys understand that cash is about building your bankroll, let's give you the lineup that is going to help you do so. Austin, top of the class, highest price guy that you like this week.
Yeah, so this is a funny category this week because this is supposed to be the guys that are above 8K that we're interested in, and there's really only like 2 guys to pick from this week.
I noticed that in my rankings. Everybody feels cheap this week.
Everybody's cheap this week, which is going to get really interesting when we get into building our full roster and particularly those tournament lineups. But the player I went for in this pick is Bijan Robinson, who is $8K on DraftKings, $8,800 on FanDuel. He crushed it against the Bucs both games last year, 20 plus points per game. We believe that he's going to continue to have consistent production, consistent touches in this offense. I'd expect him to have 20 touches a game, including probably 3 to 4 catches at least. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't score a touchdown in this matchup. He is likely going to be one of the best performing players on the slate. He's also one of the safest bets just because of the role he has in that offense. And given the matchup in particular, there are other running backs out there who we'll talk about a little bit later are now questionable for this weekend. But then there are other running backs with tougher defensive matchups than Bijan Robinson. So for me, if I'm paying up at running back this week, it is for Bijan.
And one thing we'll address before we move on to the next category in this section, and that is, Austin, you don't care about chalky picks when it comes to these cash plays. It doesn't matter to you if everybody's going to have Bijan.
That is correct, because if everybody has Bijan Robinson and he does well, then, well, that means I get to keep up with everybody. And if he does poorly, then, well, we all fail together. And there are other players in my lineup where I will get different enough that I'll be able to differentiate from the field. But in cash, you want to more often than not lean into the chalky plays, because usually that's a good signal that you are picking the right cash players, because everybody sees them as sure bets that week.
Yep. And folks, we do a very much academy themed with these. So the next section we call band nerds. These are the folks who are great students, just not quite able to make it to the top of the class, too busy practicing their instruments. We are talking about the mid-tier players, $6,000 to $8,000. Austin, I want to give a precursor to some folks who may have been a fan of yours. We are likely not going to be seeing an article for your cash plays this season. Life has gotten busy, and that's perfectly acceptable. But on the show, you are going to be giving us more options now.
Yes, that is correct. Because I am not doing the article this year, I wanted to make sure I'm giving enough players in each episode that you can set a lineup with the players I take. But as we'll talk about, you should just join the Discord, because what will happen too is on Saturday and Sunday, we'll get more news and I will change my lineups. And the benefit of being in Discord is I will tell you when I change my lineups and when I am in on a different player.
Yeah, instead of an article, you get live Austin. And I think that's going to be a lot better for everybody. Join the Discord. It is free, folks. Austin, you got 4 players in this mid-tier category for me. And I see now the player you were referring to. I saw this news just before we started to record. We'll lament on that together when you get to this guy. But go ahead and break these 4 players down for us.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and start with him. So Christian McCaffrey, I was really interested in having in my cash lineup this week, because he is $7,300 on DraftKings, $8,100 on FanDuel. If you remember vintage Christian McCaffrey from not last year, but 2023, when he was healthy all year long, and back in his Carolina Panthers days when he was consistently heavy, you played him no matter what until he became like 10K on DraftKings. You were playing him because he was that freaking good, that consistent. Yep. And I am interested in going back to the well on that. Now, he was a limited participant in practice on Thursday when we were recording this. So I will be watching what happens on Friday to see if he is able to practice in full on Friday or not. And the thing I will flag here is if he does end up not playing on Sunday, Brian Robinson immediately becomes almost a guaranteed lock in cash lineups for me.
Has to be. I mean, we made this joke when this trade happened. Brian Robinson, for lack of a better term, is the best handcuff in fantasy football. And right away, we're seeing it. And Austin, you didn't even allude to this. Everybody who got that message about Christian McCaffrey is having PTSD right now. We saw this last year, and I'm terrified. I'm sick to my stomach. And Austin, I didn't even realize I have him in the lineup that I was going to announce for later on in the show. I'm changing him right now as we speak. And thankfully, I saw a guy who gives me a little bit of savings. I don't know what I'll do with that savings, but I've made the change to my lineup for later on in the show. But Austin, you got 3 guys here who are not hurt, one of which I think, if you want to start here, benefits from his own running back maybe being questionable?
Yeah, so Brock Purdy is one of the quarterbacks that I am looking at this week. And it's really because there are a couple of ways you can approach this slate. You can decide to pay up for Jaden Daniels, who's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. Not that expensive because he's only $7K. We don't have
nobody is.
Nobody is. But for me, I wanted to be able to spend up a little bit more at receiver and at running back. And so then I get into the situation where I'm looking at guys like Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, and Jordan Love. And of those three guys, I felt the most certain about Brock Purdy. The San Francisco has a 23-point implied team total this year, and he was steady last year throughout the season. In both games against Seattle, he averaged around 20 DraftKings points. That's going to be perfectly fine for me if he scores that in this matchup. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I say now we got to talk some wide receivers, and you got two of them here for us.
Exactly. We have two high volume wide receivers that I absolutely love. They are very similar in nature and how they get their production. So Brian Thomas and Drake London are the two receivers in this range I'm looking for. I expect both of them to be in the 7 to 10 target range. They are both in that $6,500 to $6,800 range on DraftKings. Brian Thomas is a little more expensive on FanDuel, which is interesting to me. Drake London is only $7,000 on FanDuel, which feels like a little bit of a value for me because he can easily score a touchdown or two in that offense. Yeah. On the Drake London side, he just had a ridiculous target share with Michael Penix. And I will be surprised if he is below 30% roster this week. I think people are going to be in on him. And so I definitely want him in my cash lineup. And Brian Thomas, he just feels like someone I can consistently go back to right now. Even with Travis Hunter, the presence of Travis Hunter, I feel good about Brian Thomas. And honestly, the presence of Travis Hunter makes me a little bit intrigued to target Brian Thomas Jr. in tournament lineups as well.
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to bring up. Brian Thomas was a guy I was taking a look at previously, and I wondered the same thing, is if people wanting to go cheaper at Travis Hunter is going to free up some opportunity where maybe we don't see Brian Thomas as highly rostered as he may have been previously.
Yeah, exactly. I truly believe that.
Yeah, I think it's a great call when it comes to that. And then obviously you wrap this category up with Christian McCaffrey, who we already talked about. So we will slide on to the next set of players. These are the bookworms, noses in the books. Underestimated, but watch out, they are sharp. We are talking the value plays, 4,000 to 6,000. I do want to let folks know when we mention these price ranges, we're typically talking DraftKings because that is where Austin normally plays. Austin, can you quickly explain the difference between prices we tend to see on DraftKings and FanDuel? Because it basically just starts with what your budget is.
Yes, exactly. So on DraftKings, you have $50,000 to play with with your players, and you have I think it's 9 players on your roster. Yes. I always have to do the math. It's 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, flex, and a defense. So it's 9 players. It's the same roster build on FanDuel.
Precisely.
The difference is on FanDuel, you have $60,000 of a budget. So players are going to be priced more expensively on FanDuel in general. But I want to take a moment here to also name that the way that DraftKings and FanDuel price players in general is different. So the order of salary is going to be different between the two sites because DraftKings is a PPR website. FanDuel is not. It's a half PPR website. And so they devalue players who are volume hogs and inflate players that are likely to score touchdowns.
And Austin, that brings me to a player I wanted to ask you about, because one of the things I'm always fascinated by when we do these shows together are players where their price is really, really close. And I always like to ask you if it's right or if it's wrong. So I want to start with rookie Teteroa McMillan, because the price difference on Teteroa McMillan is $5,200 on DraftKings, but only up to $5,600 on FanDuel. And in my opinion, Austin, his game makes him more valuable on FanDuel, but that price jump doesn't really line up with that.
Yeah, and I think that's largely because I think that FanDuel is not counting on Carolina to score touchdowns.
Okay.
I also feel like FanDuel tends to be more extreme in how they price players. So they tend to lean one way or the other. They'll move players up really quickly and deflate players really quickly based on performance. So I could easily see this being just FanDuel not really knowing what to make of the rookie Teteroa McMillan. And so having him priced a little bit lowly because of that. What is interesting to me is that McMillan is cheaper than Travis Hunter on FanDuel. I think that is wrong, to your point. And I think that because of that, he is a value. And I think on both websites, he will be a good cash play. I think he could easily see 6 to 7 catches in this game because he will be the pass game. The pass game will run through him. And I do think that they can score enough touchdowns against Jacksonville Jaguars defense that is suspect. And so he can end up getting a touchdown in his first game. and easily pay off on both on FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yeah, I'll let people a little bit into how the sausage is made. I do DFS rankings for Football Guys, the other website I work for, and we rank 12 running backs and 12 wide receivers every week, and it just forms a consensus. Austin, what I do is when I start my DraftKings rankings, and I always do DraftKings first, just out of habit, I scroll and I look for good PPR plays, high volume guys. On FanDuel, I go and I look for high touchdown guys who may not necessarily be high PPR guys. On DraftKings, I never even considered Tetairoa McMillan. When I got on FanDuel, he was one of the first guys I put on my list. I'm like, he has to be ranked over here because he is their best player. He is very liable to score a touchdown. And that just provides such a value on FanDuel where he is just almost cheaper when you consider the percentage of the salary.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And similar players that I think are in that same vein as Tetairoa McMillan. Well, actually, let's stay on the Carolina Panthers side because I have another
Panther in here, which already makes you more optimistic than FanDuel is for the Carolina Panthers.
That is true. I am interested in Chuba Hubbard for cash contest, and we'll actually talk about him a little bit later in the tournament section as well. And it's just because he's priced at $6K and he has performed well above that level throughout the end of last season. I think when I looked on DraftKings, he averaged like 18 DraftKings points per game last season. That is exactly what you need for him to pay off a $6K salary. We're looking for players to 3x their salary. So Chuba Hubbard at $6K, if he scores 18 points, he is doing what I need him to do in my DFS lineup. He's $6,500 on FanDuel. I just think that Carolina is going to continue to be a run-oriented team. Yeah. Now, I would just flag that means less overall passing attempts, but I think that the target tree will be reduced enough for McMillan that it will be fine. I may not play both of them in a cash lineup. So this is to say, pick and choose. I'm giving you more players than you need to build a lineup. If you like one over the other, I still giving you enough running backs and receivers to go elsewhere, but I think Hubbard will continue to get the volume. And I think he also is a really good red zone threat for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, maybe don't put all your eggs in the Carolina basket in week one. Austin, you got another wide receiver here for us.
Yeah, this is a guy that I went to many times last year and it paid off for me. And I also drafted him a ton in best ball. It's Jakobi Meyers. He is $5,100 on DraftKings. And I know he wanted to be traded and he wasn't traded. What better way to go thank his team for being traded than not being traded than to go show out and say, hey, now I have all of this great trade value. Yeah. And you should trade me after all. But in all seriousness, Jakobi Meyers, he's been a steady presence in this Vegas Raiders offense. Yeah, there's a little bit more competition there with Ashton Genty in the running back room. But Meyers did well last year with increased competition from Brock Bowers. And while Brock Bowers would be the number one target, being the number two target in this offense is not going to be a bad thing. And for Meyers, if he gets 6-7 catches and 60 yards, that's going to feel comfortable to me, especially at this price point.
Plus improved quarterback play that cannot be denied. And you didn't even mention it, Austin. Yes. Revenge game narrative. The New England Patriots decided to pay Juju Smith-Schuster instead of Jakobi Meyers, the exact same contract. And I think it's very clear the wrong choice was made there. And I think Jakobi Meyers will be willing to show them that.
Oh, I think completely so.
Austin, for the first time in DFS Academy history, because of the new format of the show, you are mentioning two quarterbacks in the cash section.
I am. Well, and I wanted to name this quarterback, and I feel a little sheepish about this one. So usually around week 8, there ends up being some weird transition at quarterback that gives us some quarterback that's like 4K. Yeah. And we go to him because we say, you know what, if he can get me 12 points, who cares? Yeah. At 60% of the field plays that quarterback. I'm a little bit cautious to do this week 1, but I am interested in Joe Flacco because he is only $4,900 on DraftKings. He's $6,600 on FanDuel. So I am not playing him on FanDuel. Let me be clear, because there are other players that are cheaper than him on FanDuel that I would rather play. But on DraftKings, he's $4,900. He's going up against the Bengals, who were not good defensively last year. And I don't think the Browns are going to be winning, so they're going to be throwing the ball to keep up in this game. I think Joe Flacco could get there in cash. If you're not comfortable playing him in cash, I think he's at least worth a tournament consideration, because I think people are going to be in on the Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow stack. and you can get leverage with Joe Flacco
Yeah.
on the other side of that. But I'm intrigued by looking at him in
Yeah.
cash, and I'll talk more about when I would play him in cash and when I wouldn't in a moment, because there's another player we can punt with that is going to be, I think, one of the key decision points on this slate.
Austin, I love hopefully teaching the people things on this show. And actually, I'm going to teach myself something here because you're a far more seasoned DFS player than I am. I play in a very small tournament, me and two of my best friends from my hometown on FanDuel. It is 3 of us. We each put in, I think it's $10 every week, and it's winner takes all. A 3-person tournament, winner takes all. Do I treat that like cash or do I treat that like tourney? I will say, no offense if they watch the show, they don't. They're both awful at DFS. I don't know why they keep doing this. I tend to turn a profit in this league every year. I'm just wondering if I'm even building my lineup the right way. I mean, clearly I'm winning, but in all seriousness, there may be other people like this out there who have a very small FanDuel group or even DraftKings group. If it's a winner take all, but a small group, is that cash or is that tournament?
So I would still consider that to be a tournament. However, when I'm building my lineup, I will treat it as a cash lineup first. I will start as if I'm building a cash lineup when it's that small. If it's like 50 people or less, maybe 20 people or less, I will start as if it's a cash lineup. And then I will make minor tweaks to differentiate my lineup so that I am adjusting. Now, in a 3-person contest, I would tweak it even less. So it starts to lean more towards cash. But I'm a little bit rigid in my definitions on cash, where to me, it being a 50-50 odd is really an important distinction. But in terms of how I build my lineup, I would definitely start from the cash perspective and then decide, do I need to tweak based on my understanding of these people and how that I'm playing against?
Yeah, just so everybody's aware where this question came from, it was your Joe Flacco point. I play that tournament on FanDuel, and I always do what you suggested. I take the punt play at quarterback. I'm like, look, I can probably match them at quarterback and use this money to get better everywhere else. And that's how I've always done it. And I'm like, when you said what you said about you wouldn't play him on FanDuel, I'm like, oh, hold on a second. This is actually a great question because there are probably people out there who are in very small office pools, and maybe it is just needing to beat 3 or 4 other people.
Well, and I think for that case too, what you're also doing is you're not necessarily getting different in the players that you're choosing. You're getting different by the way you construct your roster. So in a pool like that, maybe the people you're playing with, especially if it's the same people every week, maybe they always want one of the top 3 quarterbacks. And by knowing that information and saying I'm going to punt at quarterback, it then starts to change how you can build your lineup versus how they can build their lineup. And if that top quarterback fails that week just enough and your running back pops off, it just changes the calculus that quickly.
There you go. And guys, if you play in small tournaments, let us know in the chat if any of this information was helpful, or if you have other questions about playing in small tournaments. If we see them in the comments, we'll try to get them live on the show next week. Again, it's the DFS Academy. We're here to help you guys get better at DFS, and that doesn't just mean picking the right players every week. Austin, let's wrap up cash with my favorite category. It was my college philosophy, though. As you can see, it's been a long time since I was in college. C's get degrees. It is the punt plays of the week, under $4,000. Austin, you struggled with this category last year, but it seems like you found some really nice plays this week.
I did. And I'm going to start with the guy that I was alluding to when we talked about Joe Flacco. So I'm looking at Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt in this matchup. He is 4K on DraftKings. He is also 4K on FanDuel. I think he is an absolute must play on FanDuel.
Exactly what we talked about.
He is like the minimum price on FanDuel. And I think I could see him being 80% rostered on FanDuel in some of these cash contests. Then I think it will be that extreme. Because it's such a high roster percentage, it's just a free square. It's going to cancel everything out, and it allows you to pay up elsewhere, and you can get different and make up ground in your lineup. And so when I was talking about the decision point earlier, I think the decision point is, do you punt with Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt or do you punt somewhere else? And I personally am leaning towards punting at the running back spot with Crosky-Merritt and focusing on having a balanced lineup elsewhere. If you don't feel comfortable going with Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, I think it is worth considering punting at quarterback this week. But for me, I prefer to go this route with the Washington RB1.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I'm a big fan of Bill. I made the joke. It's Bill from Capitol Hill. I'm loving every bit of it. I was able to get him in a bunch of leagues this year. I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot of fun with him in DFS before he gets overpriced, as these rookies inevitably do. Austin, is this our first tight end of the show?
This is our first tight end of the show. So there was really one tight end that stuck out to me in cash because he is so cheap and has a great matchup. It is Mike Gesicki, who is $3,600 on DraftKings, $4,900 on FanDuel. I'm going to talk about him more when we get into the tournament spot, but just as an initial point on him, Cleveland allowed the 5th most points to the tight end position down the stretch last year. From week 14 on, they struggled against the tight end position. Mike Gesicki is kind of a tight end. He's going to be lining up in the slot. He's not really like going to be in line as much. That's why they brought in Noah Fant, is they want a different tight end to do that. And so I'm treating him as a guy that can get 6-7 targets in a game. And at $3,600, like, he doesn't even need to do that. If he gets me 3 catches in this game, I'm going to feel good. So Mike Gesicki, I feel like he has an easy pathway to pay off his salary.
I feel like Mike Gesicki is going to be your new Pat Fryermuth this season, because that's what you were saying about Muth all last year, and they're kind of finding themselves in similar situations. But you said such a good point about Mike Gesicki, and that is Noah Fant is there to play tight end to let Gesicki play slot. Noah Fant coming in didn't hurt Gesicki. Inadvertently, it hurt one of my favorite players, Andre Yoshivas, because now Yoshi's going to lose snaps in the slot while Gesicki soaks them up. And Austin, obviously, you do your best to make sure that they can fill out a cash lineup here, and that also means a defense. Not everybody's favorite thing in fantasy football, but it's required in DFS, and you got a good one here.
Yes, it is required in DFS, and it's not something necessarily to stress about on cash contests.
That's a good point.
Like, in tournaments, you kind of need to get your defense right because you need to get everything right to win some of these tournaments. But in cash, I stress less about it. It's okay if you're only getting 2 to 4 points at your defense position. It's a bigger deal if you get defense wrong. And I don't think you can go wrong with the Houston Texans this week, who is $2,500 on DraftKings, $3,800 on FanDuel. I think this could be one of the top defenses in the league. And the fact that they are priced as cheaply as they are, I don't care if it's the Los Angeles Rams. They shouldn't be priced as cheaply as they are. I think they're going to be able to put pressure on the quarterback, speed up Matt Stafford. And look, Matt Stafford, he's a tough dude, but he is not 100% coming into this game. And being able to put pressure on him and speed him up is going to be an important factor for the Houston Texans achieving success this week.
Austin, we've joked about this for the 3 years we've been doing this show together. Your defense picks almost always line up with my stream of the week defense. Houston is too rostered to be my stream of the week, but the philosophy is the same when it comes to DFS: sacks and turnovers, and one leads to the other. And the Texans have a excellent front four, and they have a damn good secondary to go with it. I think it's going to work out really well for them.
Yeah, I'm very much with that.
All right, guys, that wraps up the cash segment of the show, but that is not the only thing we talk about. We also talk about tournament plays. As Austin mentioned, these are typically your long shots. You're looking to get a little bit different, not too different. We'll probably talk about that when we're talking about construction, but I will remind you, you could play DFS with us. I'm in the tournament. Austin's in the tournament. A bunch of people from Club Fantasy. It is on DraftKings. It is on FanDuel. The link is in the description of this video, and it will be shared on our Discord. That is the only way you guys are finding this link this week. Next week, it'll be in one of my articles as well. But for the most part, if you want to be in this tournament, get in the link in the description of this video or get into that Discord. Austin, let's move to cash. And how we handle this section, Austin is the expert. I want to be very clear about this. I am pretty good at setting lineups. I'm great at making rankings, which is why I do it over at Football Guys. Austin is going to give you multiple plays. I am going to give you my favorite play, and then Austin will tell me if I'm wrong about my favorite play in the week. So, Austin, let's keep this train rolling. Who is your favorite tournament quarterback of the week?
So, my favorite tournament quarterback of the week is Jordan Love, who is $6,100 on DraftKings, $7,600 on FanDuel. I'm very excited about this.
I just read your note, and I was like, I was going to question you a little bit about it, but I love the note that you put in here. So.
Yeah, the note is, what if the Packers are good? And the Lions defense starts off slow? Yeah. I think this is a very reasonable possibility to pursue. First off, the Detroit Lions did not play well against quarterbacks down the stretch last year. Nope. Those last 5 weeks of the season, they gave up the 3rd most points to the quarterback position. That's one thing. But the other thing is, I think that the Green Bay Packers are easily going to go overlooked this week. Ahead of them in terms of team implied totals, you have Cincinnati. So people are going to be looking at that Cincinnati Cleveland game. You have Washington. People might look at that game. And then you have Denver and Jacksonville. So you have some high team totals there. And then the other thing is the overall total lines. There are matchups that I think people are going to prefer to go to. Particularly that Cincinnati Cleveland matchup. I think people are going to be really attracted to Tampa Bay Atlanta. And so looking at Green Bay Detroit feels like an easy way to get different. And I like attacking the Green Bay side of it. I think this offense could be really good this year. And so betting on that week one where people are not yet ready to bet on the Packers, they're a little bit suspect of Jordan Love coming out of last year. I'm trying to lean into that level of variance that could occur there.
I think that makes a ton of sense. The way I went with it is I try to look cheap, but not too cheap, because then it can get a little weird when if a lot of people are building different lineups. It's not a surprise to me that this player is right there in the middle, a little bit towards the bottom. It also does not surprise me that this is my stream of the week quarterback, Austin. A lot of times I look at this for some like lower rostered players. So I went with Trevor Lawrence, who is my stream of the week quarterback for regular redraft fantasy. And I went this way because the Carolina defense was second worst against fantasy quarterbacks last year. I looked that they didn't get all that much better on defense. They're still very young. I think the first week's going to be rough with them. But the matter of fact of this, Austin, is you've already hit the reason why I like Trevor Lawrence. And that's Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. I get to get into that offense with the cheapest piece being the quarterback. And if it's a 3-touchdown Brian Thomas week or a 2-touchdown Travis Hunter week, I got a piece of that with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, where I think he's going to pay off at his salary against a bad Carolina defense.
Yeah, I will say Trevor Lawrence is almost a cash consideration for me, because I agree with you. I think he will be pretty reliable this week. I do think he'll be highly rostered. So if you're playing Trevor Lawrence in tournaments, you do need to find ways to get different, and maybe you stack in creative ways. So Carolina Panthers were also bad against the run last year. Maybe you do something weird and say, I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence. Like if you're in a really large contest, I'm thinking specifically, if you're in a smaller tournament, maybe don't go this weird, but in a large tournament contest like the Millie Maker, Trevor Lawrence and either Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby, like one of them could catch a receiving touchdown. And then you get this interesting correlation that other players are not going to be on.
Austin, one of these days I'm going to get this right, because I didn't think he would be highly rostered because of some of the other players you mentioned. I felt like folks are going to go Jaden Daniels. I felt like they're going to go Joe Burrow and want the high names. And Trevor Lawrence let so many people down last year. I'm going to be interested to see if you're right here. I take your word for these things, but I also feel like I just read this wrong. And when I don't mean like the show sheet, I write the show sheet. I just read the positions wrong when we get to these tourney plays every time. I guess we'll wait till next week and see if we're right. One of the things I love to do that when we start announcing the Millie Maker lineup, I also point out which one of us mentioned some of those guys, so you can see the things we got right. Neither Austin and I have won $1 million yet, but we've given you the combined of us. I think last year, Austin, we got like 6 of the 9 right if we had built the correct lineup. So we've had fun with it on this show. Austin, as we move on to the running back cash plays, you had mentioned stacking. I was going to say that we haven't talked about stacking at all this episode, but you stack a wide receiver down here. And so that's what I was going to bring that up. So we will get back to stacking, folks. But Austin, first, let's talk about the running backs.
Yes. So for the running backs in this situation, I have 2 that I'm really interested in. I already mentioned one, Chuba Hubbard. I think he could easily score 20 plus points in this game. And while I feel really comfortable about him in cash, I don't think that other people are going to be playing him at the same rostership levels. I think he's actually going to be an interesting way to get different in tournaments, because I think people might be a little bit more excited about a Tedder McMillan and going with the rookie play there. They may not, and they may overlook someone like Chuba Hubbard, who was consistently good for this offense. And Jacksonville was low-key bad against running defenses last year. And I feel the same way as you do about the Carolina defense. I don't think Jacksonville's defense got that much better this offseason. And so I feel really good about Chuba Hubbard being able to, just through sheer volume and a touchdown or 2, pay off and play and hit really big in these tournament settings. Another running back I'm very interested in is Kenneth Walker, and I think he will be very lowly rostered. I would be surprised if I could see him being 5% or below in tournament settings. He's $5,900 on DraftKings. That's one of the reasons I like him. He's fairly cheap, $6,500 on FanDuel. And San Francisco was low-key not good against the run last year.
Yeah.
Now, that could regress. They got a new defensive coordinator. There's some caveats there. But I think that the Seattle Seahawks will have a better run environment overall on the offense. I think their run game is going to be better. They're going to have they suffered a lot last year from being one of the teams that had the most rushes that went for 0 or negative yards. I think that's going to improve this year. And San Francisco, I'm nervous about the defensive personnel. There's still some big names there, sure, but I am not. For them, I want to see them actually take the step forward. And I think Kenneth Walker in this offensive system in a new season could potentially eat in week 1 and be someone that pops off in those tournament settings.
Austin, I'm just going to starting my players with tell me why I'm wrong. So my thought process on Chase Brown being my favorite running back is, one, I think he is playable in both formats. He is the best pass catching back for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is the best touchdown scorer for the Cincinnati Bengals. And then my other thought here is, unless people want to get really weird and do a quarterback running back stack, everybody is going to want to play Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and we're going to talk about one of those guys coming up in the next section. I feel like that creates some rostership possibility for Chase Brown. And then, of course, it's the Cleveland Browns, and that's probably why he's going to be too rostered. The Cleveland Browns do have a solid defense, but I don't think that's going to slow down this Bengals offense at all. The Bengals have historically struggled in Cleveland. I think they're going to come out this game wanting to make that struggle go away. I think they get out to an early lead. I think Chase Brown is able to control the second and third quarter. I think he's a safe play with high upside.
Yeah, I really like this call here because I think you're exactly right that people are going to be attracted and move towards Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and focus on those guys in their lineup. And Chase Brown might get overlooked because of that. And particularly Joe Burrow, Chase Brown stacks might get overlooked. And so I think, to your point, and what we alluded to earlier with Trevor Lawrence and potentially stacking with a running back instead of a receiver, I think that's an interesting play on the Cincinnati side too, because as much as I believe that Cincinnati is the better team in this situation, I am really nervous about their defense. And I think that they might, we'll talk about this in a second, but I think they might actually need to do some work to keep up in this game. And if Chase Brown is playing a role in that and playing a role in the pass game in particular, there could be an interesting stacking partner there with Joe Burrow to get different.
Yeah, and you talked about that with your like of punting with Joe Flacco. That would play into that bad Cincinnati defense. It actually brings up some interesting ideas for me in that small tournament I'm in. I can do a Burrow Brown stack, which is a very safe stack. It gets a little bit of that cash, but it clearly has the upside to also give me what I need to win a tournament. So I feel like I'm building my lineup while we are here on air. Austin, as we move on to the wide receivers, you actually bring up two philosophies of DFS that we have not had a chance to talk about, and that is stacking and the bring back. So you have a stack and a bring back. So why don't you talk about these players, but also talk about what those two terms mean when it comes to DFS?
Yeah, exactly. So some of the DFS 101 is you should be stacking players when possible, and as much, maybe not as much as possible, but you should be doing it regularly, especially in tournaments. And the idea, or the meaning of stacking, is that when you pick one player from a team, you also pick another player from that team. Traditionally, it is focusing on a quarterback and one of his pass catchers.
Yeah.
You can stack other ways. You can stack running backs and receivers together. It's just a different way of thinking about attacking the same team. And the idea is that, particularly with a quarterback, if one of the players is successful, one of his pass catchers is going to be successful. Absolutely. Or vice versa. And so what you're really doing is you're saying, instead of betting on 9 different players, I'm going to bet on a team. And I'm going to get 2 to 3 players from that team and say this team pops off. And if they do, probably multiple players from that team are successful in tournaments. Similarly, with the bring back, what you're saying is, not only am I just betting on this team, I'm betting on this game to pop off. So I'm going to say that both teams have to go back and forth and score a lot in order to be competitive in this game. And so then I'm picking 2 to 3 players from one team and bringing it back with 1 to 2 players on the other side of the ball. You can go pretty extreme with it. I would say, to me, I am usually going after no more than 4 players in a single matchup. However, given the slate context, maybe I would do 5 to get a little bit different in a very large field tournament. But in smaller tournaments, I'm looking at that 3 to 4 players from a matchup max range.
Yeah. And Austin, as the two of us got to analyze all of the Millie Maker lineups last year, a one stack, a quarterback and a pass catcher, or a quarterback and a running back, and a one bring back was the most common theme we saw on those tournaments that won people $1 million.
Exactly. It is something that you need to be doing in tournaments, no matter the size, but especially as you're getting up into those larger tournaments.
Perfect.
So,
talk to me about your stack and bring back this week, Austin.
yes, with that in mind, I'm looking at first off Matthew Golden, Green Bay Packers rookie wide receiver, who is $4,900 on DraftKings, $5,400 on FanDuel. Basically, I'm looking for a way to stack with Jordan Love because I am in on the Packers offense and I want to have access to that. There's arguments for different receivers within that receiver room. You could have multiple lineups that are based on Jordan Love and do different receivers, especially if you're doing a 20 max entry lineup, a contest. The way I tend to do those whenever I do enter those is to have 6 with one quarterback, 6 with another quarterback, 6 with another quarterback. So I pick my 3 favorite quarterbacks. I do 6 lineups each with those quarterbacks and stack them different ways.
Yeah.
And then have 2 that I kind of just have fun with.
I think it's a great idea.
I think in that case you could get different, but for me, I do single entry contests at this point of the year, and so I'll be focused on Jordan Love with Matthew Golden because I think he's going to be more lower rostered than like some of the other receivers in that receiving room. Similarly, I want to bring back on the Detroit side of that matchup because I think that there is high upside. And there's potential for some back and forth here. So I am looking at Jameson Williams, who is also really cheap, $5,500 on DraftKings, $6K on FanDuel. Jameson Williams, we know he has the high upside. He can score 20 plus fantasy points in the game. And I could see him getting low rostership in this matchup as well, because people may be more interested in Amon-Ra St. Brown. They may be more interested in Jahmyr Gibbs, for example, and not overlooking Jameson Williams, who I think could have some good upside here. So that's how I'm looking at building this, focusing on that. Jordan Love, Matthew Golden, Jameson Williams as part of my base.
I think that's a great play. I think you also are about to tell us about the first injured player, and I don't think it's a surprise you're willing to maybe take a flyer on an injured player when it comes into tournaments versus a cash game.
Yes, so that is accurate, and it will depend on what news we get on Friday. So the player is Darnell Mooney, who is $5K on DraftKings and $5,800 on FanDuel. DraftKings.
I thought you said draft pool, and I wasn't even going to correct you.
Incredible. $5,800 on FanDuel. As you noticed, I like both Bijan Robinson and Drake London in cash this week. And I think that means some people will be inclined to play both of those guys in tournaments as well. So I want to pivot off of that. And I want to see how can I get leverage in tournaments so that if Drake London isn't the highest scoring player, who might be? Well, Darnell Mooney might be. And he did that at times last year. He was often in the optimal lineup and contest. So he is a pivot from London. Now, he was a limited participant in practice on Thursday with a shoulder injury. So I will be looking to see what happens on Friday and use that to determine whether or not I go with Darnell Mooney. But don't worry, I will have another pivot for that matchup later on.
And then, Austin, it's a little surprising that we've made it this far in the episode and we're just about to talk about the best wide receiver in fantasy football.
Yes, well, and it's Ja'Marr Chase, who is $8,100 on DraftKings, $9,200 on FanDuel. The reason that I have him in here is because, as I mentioned, Cincinnati might need to low-key throw the ball in this matchup because their defense scares the nonsense out of me. And the thing about Ja'Marr Chase is when he pops off, he breaks the slate. And so there is part of me that is inclined to play him, whether or not I have Joe Burrow in my lineup in case he scores 30 points. I won't do it every time, but there will be lineups where I definitely have Ja'Marr Chase in my lineup because he has the potential to fully break the slate. And if I have the salary for it, I want to get there. But honestly, Ryan, you took one of my favorite plays of the week.
And he's one of my favorite plays of all time. So I do not feel bad about taking Mr. Mike Evans taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Mike Evans is a guy who I think is ready to show up for week 1. But more importantly, Austin, I think he needs to. And what I mean by that is this is a team that doesn't have Chris Godwin. This is a team that has a rookie wide receiver playing opposite. Not that great at tight end. This is a team that needs to lean on the guy who's proven what he can do for them. And then when you look at Mike Evans' last 2 games against the Atlanta Falcons. One was in 2024. The other was in 2023. 2 touchdowns against them in one game in 2024. He missed the other game. 82 yards and a touchdown before them. He beats up on this current regime of the Atlanta Falcons. I need the upside, and Mike Evans in week 1 screams upside. Baker Mayfield is going to go to his guy. I think this could easily be a 2 and even 3 touchdown game for Mike Evans this week.
Yeah, and part of the reason I really love Mike Evans this week is I think people are attracted to Emeka Egbuka this week more than they are Mike Evans.
Let me just interrupt real quick. When I put together my rankings this week, I left Emeka Egbuka out of FanDuel and had him low on DraftKings because I think there's a little bit of PPR difference there. I'm so much lower than the consensus right now because I'm not as bought in, because I am bought into Mike Evans. So.
Exactly. And I think that is key for tournaments this week. I do think Mike Evans could be the key to winning tournament lineups this week because of that. I think people are going to want to play Emeka Egbuka and ignore Mike Evans, and Mike Evans could end up 5 to 10% rostered. And even if it's in that 10% rostership range, that's still healthy, right? We don't need 9 players that are 5% rostered.
Yeah.
We need a mixture of both, and it's okay if Mike Evans is 10, even if he's 15 to 20%. I feel comfortable with that because he could score legit 30 points in this game, and Emeka Egbuka will likely be more highly rostered and may not get there.
We're making great time this episode, Austin. So I want to ask about one thing that we haven't talked about, and we don't normally do this. Is Baker Mayfield a guy that you're worried about in tournament for maybe being over rostered? Baker Mayfield obviously was great in fantasy last year, but we haven't seen that translate to redraft excitement. With this love of Mike Evans and this possible love of Emeka Egbuka, is Baker Mayfield a playable asset?
So I am not concerned about him from a rostership perspective because it is hard in general for quarterbacks to get pushed up in roster percentages in tournaments anyways. It is hard for them to get beyond 20% because people are looking at different options. Yeah. And so you usually don't have to stress about that as much. I worry about him more from a ceiling perspective. I think that Mike Evans can get there and Baker Mayfield doesn't, because part of the reason that Baker Mayfield was so successful last year was because of his rushing touchdowns last year. And I don't think, and his rushing yardage last year. And I don't think that's going to keep up. And so to me, the thing with Baker Mayfield is you're counting on him to pass for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, which, as I say that out loud, he's playing the Atlanta Falcons, may be worth betting on.
That's kind of why I brought it up, because I'm like, we're out here just waxing poetic about Mike Evans possibly dropping 3. I'm like, well, if Mike Evans drops 3, Baker Mayfield pays off. So.
Yeah, so I guess that is fair. I could see you playing Baker Mayfield. There are other quarterbacks that I am more interested in because I'm so in love with Jordan Love this week. Yeah. But I do think, I guess what I will say is, I actually have a lineup right now that I've built that has Mike Evans. And instead of Baker Mayfield, I have picked Michael Penix as a way to pivot off of Baker Mayfield.
Sort of thing.
A bring back, and also he's cheaper than Baker Mayfield, and so I can pay it for some other players elsewhere. That is also one of the free tickets I got to the Millie Maker this week. So I'm aiming for really high upside in that contest. Yeah. But in a smaller contest, like if you're playing a hundo on DraftKings, Baker Mayfield is probably a perfectly fine play and might be the key to winning that contest.
Maybe I'm wrong, Austin, but maybe is one of the players you're about to talk about in the next section your stack with Michael Penix in that lineup?
I think actually, yes. I think he is. So we're on to the tight ends, and I have Kyle Pitts here as probably one of my favorite tournament plays of the week. Mike Evans is definitely number 1, but Kyle Pitts is up there because he is another Drake London and Bijan Robinson pivot. He is only $4,300 on DraftKings, $5,200 on FanDuel. I think that with Michael Penix under center, Kyle Pitts is going to get rolling again. Kyle Pitts is going to get rolling again. And I know he has had a rough couple of seasons, but
nobody likes Michael Penix. Or excuse me, nobody likes Kyle Pitts. Now you got me doing it. Nobody likes Kyle Pitts.
Throw that out the window.
Yeah.
The question we're asking for a tournament is, can he get there in one game? Can he score me 20 points in one game? Yes, he can. Kyle Pitts can definitely do that. And I think it is a great week to do it because people are going to be in on London and Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and you gave us a second tight end that you've already kind of talked about.
Yeah, I already talked about Mike Gesicki. I think he's a really good tournament play. I think if you went Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Mike Gesicki, that's a really weird way to get different in those large tournaments. Yeah. And I like that. I'm kind of a fan of that. I might actually do that now that I say it out loud.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, could Mike Gesicki low-key break the slate? Like, if Gesicki scored 2 touchdowns and Jamar Chase scored 1, just imagine what those lineup differences would look like.
Yeah. That would be wild. There's always one of those players, and it's almost always a weird one at tight end, Austin, where we're like, really? This was the Millie Maker tight end?
Exactly.
A Mike Gesicki 2-touchdown game does that. So
100%.
And someone who I like to certainly score 1 touchdown and probably 2 touchdowns is Hunter Henry. And I cannot imagine he's high rostered. I am shocked at how low the world is on Hunter Henry in redraft fantasy football. And I think that translates to DFS this week. But what I think people are forgetting is Hunter Henry led this team in targets last season. Hunter Henry is now playing in a Josh McDaniels system. And I'm not saying he's Rob Gronkowski, but I am saying he can play that Rob Gronkowski role. And then you get the Raiders. And Austin, obviously it's not always easy relying on last year's stats, but the Raiders were a bottom 5 team against fantasy tight ends last year. A lot of what you were talking about with Cleveland translates to this game. Yes, there's Stephon Diggs, but he's banged up. Other than that, not a lot of great wide receiver options. There is no reason to think that Hunter Henry there's no reason not to think that Hunter Henry could go in here and lead this team in targets, at least in week 1. 2 seasons ago, Hunter Henry had monster week 1 and week 2. Last season, he had a monster week 2. This guy tends to start fast, Austin, and I think we see it again this week for dirt cheap, certainly in DraftKings.
Yeah, I like that play. And I think it's a good one because I think Drake May and Hunter Henry, they demonstrated there was good chemistry there last year in an offensive ecosystem that wasn't conducive to tight end production. They should be better this year, and that should be beneficial to Hunter Henry.
Yep. Austin, we as we did with the cash section, we got to wrap up with the defenses. Defenses matter in DFS. I'm going to just tell the world right now, Austin's first pick, Houston. He already talked about it. My only pick, Houston. Austin already talked about it. So Austin, why don't you wrap this whole thing up talking about the other defensive people are looking to pivot, and they're actually, I was going to say, on FanDuel, they're a little bit cheaper than the Houston Texans, though they're actually more expensive on DraftKings. One of the funny things about these sites sometimes.
Yeah, which is weird because they do score pretty similarly across the website. So FanDuel and DraftKings just straight up disagree on this one. I have the Green Bay Packers, who are $2,900 on DraftKings, $3,500 on FanDuel. I said the same question with Jordan Love. What if the Packers are good and the Lions start off slow?
Yeah.
The other thing about this matchup that is intriguing to me, well, first off, backing up a second, I think the Packers defense was low-key interesting before they traded for Micah Parsons.
Exactly.
And then they traded for Micah Parsons. Now, Micah Parsons, he has been questionable, been working back through a back injury, although how real is that back injury? We'll find out, I guess. So I will keep an eye on whether or not he plays. I'm going to play them no matter what, though. I think with or without Micah Parsons, this defense could be interesting. The other thing is Jared Goff playing outdoors.
Yeah, the Jared Goff indoor narrative gets flipped on his head when he's outdoors. There's a reason it's the indoor narrative. So.
Exactly. So, an interception or 2 could be in play. We're outdoors.
I completely agree, guys. That is going to wrap up the show. But Austin and I tend to do something fun during the season. We call it the valedictorian shootout. This is me and Austin creating 2 lineups just for a head-to-head. Couple of things about this. We go with DraftKings scoring. We also are not allowed to change the lineup. So if you pick a guy who doesn't play, you're probably going to lose this week. This is just for fun. I always make this note. If you play in the tournaments with us, this will not be Austin's lineup. It'll probably be my lineup. I said it tonight. I get kind of lazy. It's who I am as a person. I beat Austin's ass last year. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't remember what the final standings were because I deleted them, but I know I did very, very well. He had to come back in the middle of the season. So Austin, I will announce my lineup first. You heard about most of these guys on the show. So I am going Trevor Lawrence and Chase Brown, obviously 2 of my favorite plays. CMC was originally my second running back, but because we can't change these lineups, I look for someone who is similarly priced that I like. I went with Bucky Irving. So there's a little bit of savings there. I don't get to take advantage of them because my lineup is set. I didn't realize I was picking Bucky Irving and Mike Evans, so go Buccaneers. But Mike Evans, one of my favorite wide receivers this week. Austin, I looked for the stack and I went Trevor Lawrence to Brian Thomas Jr., but then I also have my Tampa Bay bring back Drake London as my other wide receiver. I was shocked at how cheap Ricky Pearsall is, being the de facto number 1 for San Francisco. He fit perfectly in this lineup for me. And then I went Hunter Henry in Houston. You will notice a theme and kind of a joke about this. I tend to just build my lineup from my favorite tournament plays, which is terrible to do in a head-to-head against Austin. And it's the reason he'll go 17-0 against me. Austin, let's hear who you got for week 1.
Yeah, we should look at our lifetime stats on
Oh,
this
it's
because
the year before it was terrible. So just so folks know the evolution of this show, Austin and I used to do this show with Kelly Singh as a third co-host, and Austin would build lineups that just embarrassed Kelly. Kelly notoriously built 2 tight end lineups, which do not play well in DFS. Kelly knows this is all love. I would say all of this to her face. But when Kelly left, I wanted to keep the tradition going. The first year, Austin, I think I won 3 times. It was so bad. So you were definitely up lifetime. You're certainly up lifetime in the show's history. I don't mean to disparage you, but last season was a good season for me for this very stupid little contest that we play. So.
Well, that's fair. And I did have a little bit of a down cash year last year.
Yeah, you mentioned that you did better in tournament than cash last year. So
yeah, but this year we're looking to get back on track. So my lineup for this, I first off have Brock Purdy at the quarterback spot at $6,200. I am not a coward in this case, and I am keeping Christian McCaffrey in my lineup at $7,300. I'm going with a 3 running back build. So I have McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson at 8K, and Bill Krosky Merritt at 4K, which is why I can pay up for those other 2.
Yeah, I was going to say such savings there.
It's really nice. Imagine if I also play Joe Flacco, I could potentially get Jamar Chase in my lineup. Actually, I could get Jamar Chase in my lineup if I play Joe Flacco. Yeah. But right now I have a 3 receiver build with Brian Thomas Jr. at 68K or 6,800, Drake London at 6,500, and Jacoby Myers at 5,100. All volume guys that I love. Mike Gesicki as my tight end at 3,600, and the Houston Texans defense. So we'll be tied there.
I was going to say we're tying on defense, and we are tying at 2 of the wide receivers. So this will be interesting. This is going to be a very big running back deciding week. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. For the last time, folks, you can play DFS with us. Link is in the description of this video. Every week, starting next week, we will announce the winners live on air. So if you want to hear your name, get into these tournaments, beat us. We will tell everybody that you won. Austin, I think you are strictly sticking to videos this year. So they're going to see you a lot on our YouTube. Let people know where they can find you.
Yes, you can catch me here. So Josh and I do a Thursday night showdown slate show every week. You can catch that here at post Thursday mornings. You can catch me here on the DFS Academy every Friday. We are tentatively doing some additional showdown slates throughout the year. So be on the lookout for those. If you subscribe and hit those notifications, you'll get notified anytime they drop. But then most importantly, join the Discord. That's where I'll be more active, particularly on the weekends as we are finishing up building our lineups heading into games starting at 1:00 on Sundays. And that's where I will drop information of where I'm thinking about changing players. Maybe I'll do a late swap here and there. We can get into some of those strategy conversations and future episodes, but also in the DFS channel, in the Discord. And you can also ask questions anytime, and maybe we'll talk about them on the show. Who knows? Oh, yeah, and also, if you show your winnings in the DFS channel in that Discord, we will talk about them on this show. We want to celebrate our wins together. And so if you win big and want to show it off, do it in the Discord.
And right at the top, we're going to talk about it. We're going to go Millie Maker lineup, and then we're going to talk about our Discord big winners of the week. So you're going to hear your name in the first 10 minutes of this show if you guys start dropping those lineups in the Discord. I would remind everybody, ton of fantasy content at Club Fantasy this season. I think we're doing 8 shows a week now, spread out through the entire week. This show will drop every Friday morning. This is not a live stream show, but if you drop your comments in the description or in the link, what am I saying? Drop your comments on this video like a normal person does. We tend to answer them. And like I said, if you drop interesting ones, we might find a way to get them on the show the following week as well. So be interesting. Hit subscribe, do all the things that are going to help us grow on YouTube. You're not going to find a ton of DFS content on the website this year. I do want to be very clear about that. Austin and I do weekly rankings, so you will find weekly rankings. I do what's called the weekly matchup report, where I show you the top 10 matchups to target against quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. And I think I'm going to find a way to turn this show sheet into a article that I'm going to drop on Saturday. So keep an eye out for that as well. It's something I have to experiment with a little bit, but honestly, YouTube is where you're going to find a lot of our content. Still a lot of redraft stuff going on at clubfantasyffl.com. But if you're looking strictly for DFS, you need to hit subscribe on the YouTube. get into the Discord, like Austin said. That wraps up this show. Remember, DFS is always here for you. Your season's not over yet, but it's going to end eventually, I'm sorry to say. And DFS is still going to be there to help you set a lineup, as Austin groans, as I'm already forecasting the end of people's fantasy season before it's literally even started. But we're going to be here to help you set those winning lineups all year long on DFS Academy. We will see you folks next Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. Win some money.